good morning, everyone. Our panel this morning is entitled How Michigan is Poised to Address the Future of the Transportation System. We have very distinguished members on the panel this morning, and I will go in alphabetical order, not necessarily the order of who's most distinguished. We'll start with Director Paul Ajaba of Michigan DOT. Paul has over 30 years experience with Michigan Department of Transportation, and in 2019 he was appointed the director by Governor Gretchen Whitmer. Previously served MDOT as a university region engineer. During his 7 years as a region engineer, Paul oversaw the team's involvement in the planning, design, construction of several major projects, but including the US 23 Flex Route, a project that was nominated for America's Transportation Award, landing among the top 12 national finalists. He holds a Bachelor of Sciences degree in Civil Engineering from Prairie View A&M and a Master's degree in Construction Engineering from the University of Michigan. He's also a licensed professional engineer in the state of Michigan. Please welcome Paul Ajaba. Next is Congresswoman Debbie Dingell. Congresswoman Dingell represents Michigan's 12th Congressional District in the U.S. House of Representatives, serves in the House leadership as a co-chair of the Democratic Policy and Communications Committee. She's a member of the Energy and Commerce Committee and the Natural Resources Committee, where she leads critical issues, including affordable and accessible healthcare, clean energy and water, domestic manufacturing and supply chain resilience, and protecting our wildlife and natural resources. In 2021, Congresswoman Dingell worked together with the White House, the auto industry, auto workers, and environmentalists to announce the Biden administration's goal of having 50% of new vehicles sold by 2030 be zero-emission vehicles. Before being elected to Congress, Representative Dingell worked in the auto industry for over 3 decades, where she was president of the General Motors Foundation and a senior executive responsible for public affairs. Please welcome Congresswoman Dingell. Next is Trevor Paul. Trevor is the Chief Mobility Officer for the state of Michigan and leads Michigan's Office of Future Mobility and Electrification. In this position, Trevor is responsible for working across state government, academia, private industry to grow Michigan's mobility ecosystem through strategic policy recommendations and new support services for companies focused on the future of transportation. Prior to this position, Trevor served as a Senior Vice President of Business Innovation at the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, where he led the official state programs for mobility, supply chain assistance, export assistance, and entrepreneurial assistance. Trevor holds a bachelor's degree in economics and marketing from Grand Valley State University and a Master of Business Administration from the University of Detroit Mercy. Please welcome Trevor. And finally, I want to welcome Professor Dawn Tilbury. Professor Tilbury currently serves as the Associate Vice President for Research here at the University of Michigan, in charge of the Convergent Sciences. She also directs Bold Challenges Initiative to bring together teams of faculty with social and technical science expertise to address societal challenges. She received a BS in Electrical Engineering from the University of Minnesota and an MS and PhD in Electrical Engineering and Computer Sciences from the University of California, Berkeley. In 1995, she joined the faculty in the Mechanical Engineering Department here at the university, where she's currently a professor with a joint appointment in Electrical Engineering and Computer Science, and a core member of the Robotics Institute. From 2017 to 2021, she was Assistant Director for Engineering at the National Science Foundation, where she oversaw a federal budget of nearly $1 billion annually, while all the while maintaining her position here at the university. Please welcome Dawn Tilbury. So the focus of the discussion today is we're going through so many dramatic changes in the industry. Thanks, Henry. Changes to the vehicles themselves in terms of automation, electrification, changes that are going to be hitting transportation system in the form of changes to the electrical grid. And the question is how are we prepared for these rapid changes that are coming into play? So I have some questions I'm going to ask of the panel, and please feel free to elaborate as much as you want, as we have plenty of time. One of the first questions I have is, what is the most significant change that we can anticipate moving forward? And I want to start with Paul, given the recent infrastructure bill and how he sees that perhaps affecting the state.
Thank you, Professor Sayer. Good morning, everybody. Truly glad to be part of this panel. I think for me, looking at the way the technology is really changing so fast, I expect that the OEMs are probably eventually going to start moving towards a level 5 autonomous vehicle production. Obviously, a lot of talk about EVs has slowed that march towards level 5 down a little bit. But then the question is, what role do we as infrastructure owners play in that change that's coming? And that's where Trevor comes in, because he's working directly with a lot of the OEMs to see how we can engage at the forefront of a lot of this discussion to make sure when you're talking about V2X, what role are we playing to make sure the technology of pavement marking, the sign talking to the vehicles and all that is taking place at the same time. Most of you may not be aware of this, but when M-City was being conceived initially, MDOT played a pivotal role in the formation of M-City. We did not have a choice, quite frankly, because we have a lot of OEMs here in Michigan, and we were being pushed to be part of that solution. And I think looking back at that decision, probably the best thing we could have done to get in the forefront of this technology. So to me, I think the march towards level 5 will probably start hitting up again once we get this EV issue out of the way.
Great, thanks, Paul. Congresswoman Dinkle?
So I'm going to be a bit blunter. I'm going to talk about both subjects. First of all, I want to say that I work with both of the gentlemen on either side of me a lot. And it is critical that the federal, state, and local governments work together. On the subject of electric vehicles, there are 3 buckets to make electric vehicles a success. And I did work very hard last year. Some of you may have even 2 years ago, 3 years ago now, when the Green New Deal came out. I did not sign on to it because it did not have labor at the table. And I said that all the partners need to be at the table, but that I would convene the environmentalist community, the workers. The OEMs were there, but less of it. All of the labor unions, UAW, IBEW, steel workers were at the table with the presidents of every major environmental group. And we were, and people listened to each other. There were a lot of tough discussions, a lot of fears, a lot of what were the issues. And it culminated in an event at the White House last August, where we set a target for 50% sales of zero-emission vehicles by the year 2030. But to meet that, there are 3 buckets that have to be done. One, the vehicles need to be affordable. And not meaning to insult anybody, but Tesla's not a vehicle that the working person can afford. 2, we have to invest in battery R&D so that it does have range. and that people have confidence that not only can you get to work, but that if you want to go up north, you're going to be able to get there. And we need to be able to, right now, 80% of the minerals we're using in batteries are coming from China, a fact that Joe Manchin cites to me regularly. And by the way, if that agreement had gone anywhere near the hill, we never would have announced it last August. And I'll talk about the minerals in a minute. 3, we got to build out the infrastructure. And we got to upgrade the power grid. Both have to happen. So we got the infrastructure bill passed. We'll probably talk about that more in a minute. There is some money in there, but not nearly enough. Build Back Better helped incentivize. There was, in order to encourage electric vehicle sales, there had been a tax credit that is capped out for all of the manufacturers at this point. It's become controversial for some reasons. If you want to talk about it, we can. 2, there was money in there for R&D. And 3, the real money to help build out the infrastructure and upgrade the power grid was in the Build Back Better bill. And quite frankly, we're not going to meet that 50% sale figure if we don't address those issues. So I'm working on it. Talked to the president about it a lot. I talked to people at the White House. Joe Manchin is a friend. He will sit down. We got to get that done. And if we don't have supportive policies that are going to get us there, that target's going to be hard. Now, Paul's more optimistic on level 5 than I am. I'm working hard on it. We have not passed autonomous vehicle legislation in this country. We are behind other countries. We want to stay at the forefront of innovation and technology. The federal government's got a responsibility to do the regulation that we need to do it. I was very proud of the fact that I had a bill, I hate to say it, it's about 4 years ago now, wasn't it, that passed the House unanimously, and Senate never took it up. We still have not passed autonomous vehicle legislation. You still cannot, you can't sell it. People are out in the roads testing it, but we have not, and other countries are ahead of us. And I am, quite frankly, getting more passionate by the day with my own leadership about the need that if we want to stay at the forefront, if we don't want to secede the leadership to China and India and other countries, we've got to get this legislation done. Now, I am very proud of the fact that we have been working with the stakeholders. Labor has been afraid of it. What does it mean to their jobs? We've had multiple meetings pulling everybody together. Probably get in trouble for saying this one now. We have had on and off discussions with the lawyers on a number of those issues. We're back doing it. I'm hopeful that we're going to introduce new legislation that will move this year. Some of my Democrats that have blocked it in times past have committed to have hearings yet this year and move it. But if the United States wants to stay at the forefront of innovation and technology, we've got to pass policies that are going to make it possible. We cannot, there are a lot of complicated issues, but complicated issues don't mean you don't deal with them. And if this country wants to stay at the forefront, we've got to work, the federal government's got to do some action. And by the way, there are state issues. You all are trying to deal with some of the state issues about who's going to have responsibility for which issues. We've been talking about that for years. And you can't, manufacturers cannot deal with patchwork of laws. Some need to be done at the federal level and others are definitively state levels. Those are things we're all working on, but they need to get done or we're going to stay behind.
Thank you. Trevor, changes we can anticipate?
All right. Man, I'm fired up. Good morning, everybody. I love being on panels with you. Okay, so obvious question in a panel discussion nowadays, who all owns an electric vehicle? Raise your hand. Okay, by 2030, we need about half the room. That's the biggest challenge, getting this half of the room to buy an electric vehicle.
We can mix it up.
We can mix it up, yeah, hodgepodge, different makes and models. But look, electric vehicles require less parts. Combining that with the fact that, in this state, we think of autonomous, connected, shared, and electric as descriptors for vehicles, when the rest of the world thinks of them as foundational technology platforms that are influencing every industry, I mean, we need to widen our aperture as a state, as a region. How do you do that? Leverage your automotive advantage to influence other modes of transportation. And you're seeing our companies do that. Look at BrightDrop and GM. Look at, the Detroit 3 are investing in maritime autonomy. They're investing in rail technology. They're investing in aerial drones. That's where the world is going. And frankly, car ownership may not be something my kid worries about. And so I think the biggest change coming obviously will be with, how we buy our model or how we buy our cars, how we emit. But then, switching over to AVs, gosh, guys, I think what we're heading into is a world that will change feature by feature by feature by feature by feature. Meaning, for instance, right now in Detroit, there are tests going on where literally you just drop your keys off at the entrance to a parking garage and the car parks itself. That technology is already in the world and it's happening in Detroit. And, it's enterprise, it's Ford, but it's also property owners like Bedrock. It's this cross-industry collaboration. And I think that's how you'll see the autonomous future sort of play out in real life. Certain aspects of your drive are going to be taken away from you, but that's okay because it'll save you time. It'll be a little safer. Maybe a hotel valet, highway parking. Eventually, parts of cities will be closed down at certain times to just autonomous vehicles, but that will be okay because you'll have more options. Now, last thing I want to hit on is the future of charging infrastructure. Because in order to get half the room to buy an electric vehicle, I got to make sure you're not scared to do it. I got to make sure that if you want to drive to Chicago, it's okay. It's not going to change your habit too much, especially if you have a 2-year-old and 4-year-old and 6-year-old and whatever. And so you do that by taking advantage of the $7.5 billion that we got through the infrastructure bill. And, in Michigan, we got about $110 million. And now there's a really smart team within Governor Whitmer's office, but also in state government that's trying to think about, okay, which corridors are priority? How do we space it? What's the optimization map look like? What are some of the really difficult edge cases where we need to leverage like solar? Maybe like reinvent a lighthouse. Reinvent a lighthouse. Use that infrastructure to power a charging station. We're actually thinking about that because we're building a Lake Michigan electric vehicle route, which will be a signature electric vehicle route that we hope reinvents ecotourism. A lot of times people think of ecotourism as, it started in the 80s, but it was always about the resort. But what about the space between the resort and your home? Like, what about the road? Why can't that be more eco-friendly? And so beyond just thinking about some of the things that we need to do along I-75 and I-94 and Woodward, we also need to make sure that we're being aspirational, that we're dreaming about making sure that, we have these signature routes that we're driving for, not just the automotive industry, but the tourism industry and other parts of the state outside of Southeast Michigan. I could keep going, but I'm not going to. So I'm going to turn it back to you.
Dawn?
Oh, sure, thanks. It's hard to think about what the biggest change is going to be because there's going to be so many. And I think I like to think back to what Haley was saying this morning about Michigan pioneering in road testing in 1912 and stoplights in 1918. What is it going to look like 50 years from now? Are we still going to have parking garages downtown, or will autonomous vehicles just drop us off where we need to go? When my house was built in 1924, it didn't have a garage. Will houses 50 years from now be built with garages or not? And I think trying to think about how this autonomous and connected vehicles are going to change the whole infrastructure, everybody's lives. Do we still need all the things we have, all the highways, all the roads, or can we connect autonomous vehicles with public transportation and make things overall safer, more equitable, and give people the access to transportation? Not everybody probably wants to have an autonomous car in their garage because it's going to sit there 95% of the time without anybody in it. That's a lot of wasteful infrastructure, especially as autonomous vehicles are expensive, right? Can they be more shared? Can they be more equitable? And I think there's a lot of really interesting questions that researchers and community people need to come together to come up with solutions. What is the future going to look like? We heard Michigan was at the future of the standard vehicle or internal combustion engine revolution in the early part of the last century. I think we can be at the forefront of this new revolution in this current century. So I think there's changes are going to be everywhere. We heard about infrastructure, we heard about electric grid, we heard about charging, but I think we need to think more broadly. What is the transportation infrastructure that we have created? There's a lot of problems with it. How can we reimagine it to be safer, more equitable, and more efficient? for everybody to get where they need to go when they need to go.
Thanks, Dawn. Of course, for those of you who are familiar with Ann Arbor, we're seeing some deployment of safe streets approaches and the addition of bike lanes and things of that nature. And it's a start, but it's still a bit of a patchwork. We're moving in that direction. How well are we prepared? To deal with the changes and to utilize the funds that are being made available, and let's hope that Build Back Better or some version of it gets passed. Are we going to be prepared in order to really take on the challenges of the future? And start with Paul again.
Sure. I think as a state, we are well ahead of a lot of states out there. But as a country, as Congresswoman Dingell said, there's opportunity for policies at the national level translates to the rest of the states. Because quite frankly, again, Michigan, MDOT, we did not have a choice because we have a lot of OEMs here. We have to walk in lockstep with them to make sure we're keeping up with the technology. So regards to on the state level, we are way ahead of other states, but on the national level, we need to bring other states along to buy into this technology. Because some are still very reluctant about the possibility of level 4, level 5 vehicle operating in our roadways. You could go anywhere in the street of Ann Arbor or Lansing, you see a lot of testing going on. M-City, that kind of lab is not all over the country. It's far and in between. So in that regard, yes, Michigan is ahead on CAV and on electrical vehicle. Some of you may not be aware, about a month or so ago, we put out an RFP to have electric wireless charging on our roadway. Electron was the selected company to help us do that, to pilot that. And now we see a couple of other states are getting in that game. So we in Michigan try to be in the forefront of a lot of the technologies that the OEMs are sharing with us. Again, that's where Trevor comes in, because he works directly with the OEMs, and he's like the conduit between MDOT and the OEMs, and to help us determine where their thinking is and how we can be partners. Instead of reactive, we are being proactive.
I have a follow-up question, and that is, can you point to some examples where we've been partnering with states, either regionally or across the country?
Oh, absolutely. Again, on the CAV side, without mentioning M-City again, myself and several of our team are on national level committees that are helping craft legislation to help other states come along on this journey. Again, there are some states that has not even ventured into the CAV arena at all. So it's still hodgepodge all over the country. But as the Congresswoman say, if Congress passes the legislation, say, we want level 4, level 5, and this, 2035, whatever the case may be, I think you'll see a national movement towards that.
Congresswoman, earlier you talked about some of the challenges. One question I have for you is, has it been really much of a challenge bringing all the parties to the table? I think you said initially not everybody was at the table, but is it getting more and more that people are coming to the table?
It depends. EVs and autonomous vehicles for me are two. Eventually, autonomous vehicles are likely to be electric vehicles, but there are a lot of different issues with each one. You talked about, Trevor, the fact of the matter is that an electric vehicle has fewer parts. Workers are worried about what that means for their job. And, I did with the governor a town hall with union workers a few weeks ago. And I actually, because I have for a couple of years heard them talk more about how they were worried about what it would mean to their job, they didn't raise that issue as much as how complicated an electric vehicle is, how it's going to take far different training to be able to repair the vehicle. Many people are worried about we got to have charging stations, and how are those charging stations going to be done? What's the role of government to play in establishing those? You know, I keep going to Joe Manchin because Joe Manchin's who I'm having these very serious talks with more than anybody. But Joe is like, whose job is it to build out those electric vehicle stations? Is that a private sector role, a public sector role? And then we also have to, you know, you need to think about as people buy electric vehicles, how are they going to charge overnight? Not everybody has a garage. How are they going to install a safe charging station? I used to say when we have the first fire in a garage, we're going to hear about it. Well, I saw the first fire in the garage a few weeks ago. I don't know if you saw that. And, you know, so there are a lot of but we all, you know, you'd be surprised at how much we do talk. We try to get very pragmatic about it. How are we going to address those issues? And we're trying to do that. Autonomous vehicles have a very different, many different issues. I mean, the fact that I can't even get my own leadership to move it, I mean, quite frankly, I'm probably going to get in trouble for saying it now. But I mean, this country's got a responsibility. Policymakers have a responsibility that if we do want to stay at the forefront of innovation and technology, then we've got to deal with the policies and look at these issues. And not addressing it because we have concerns, all it does is put us behind other countries. But, you know, I'll tell you this story. I don't know if it's a good or a bad story, but several years ago, we were at Mackinac. It was right before John had died. And AARP had done a survey on autonomous vehicles. Autonomous vehicles will make us safer on the road, as Haley was talking about. We know the benefits of autonomous vehicles. And John, most of you know, I was married to this wonderful, great man, and he still wanted to drive when he really should not have been driving, and I wouldn't let him drive. And I kept saying, autonomous vehicles will give you independence. You know, you'll be able to go and get in the vehicle. So we were do you remember this? I don't remember if Bob was there. AARP survey, and I wanted John to be on this panel and tell people what autonomous vehicles will mean for them. And he got up there and he was just, no way was he going to get in an autonomous vehicle, and nobody should trust him, and they weren't going to be safe. He failed me greatly, although I should have known it because he was always tough. Do you remember this? Paul does. But a lot of people are afraid of autonomous vehicles. We need to, forget the fact that truck drivers, and I've been meeting with the Teamsters and the independent truck drivers, and by the way, there's still going to be drivers going to be in the truck. There are these are complicated issues, but we have to, we do need to make sure they're going to be safe. And there are some companies that are much better at working with us than others. There have been some incidences on the road that people try to deny. We shouldn't deny them. We should try to figure out what's going on, and we got to figure out how we're going to get there. But people, and it may be generational, are also afraid of autonomous vehicles, and we got to deal with those issues too.
Trevor, all right, okay. Both. Yeah. Yeah, so I think we're okay for the moment, but I'm still worried about the future. I think that there's a couple of different aspects here that are scary. I'll give an example. So a few years ago, Holland, Michigan was given school buses, electric school buses. We made a big deal about it. And it was the first of many different school bus deployments. Problem was, after the announcement, the drivers didn't want to drive because they didn't understand the range of the vehicle, and the maintenance workers didn't want to work on it because they were worried about an exploding battery. So I just keep going back to that example because I'm picturing it times 100,000 and wondering, like you mentioned, the garage example, when things start to get real, when you begin to see fires that can't be put out, what are we doing policy-wise? What are we doing we actually just had a call with the city of Auburn Hills about fire suppression. And not just in garages, but in these manufacturing facilities that have other chemicals and other things that could compound the problem. I think from a local policy perspective, we are way behind where we need to be. Even like, I had to call Kroger, and Kroger's like, we're not sure how to solve the issue with chargers in parking lots, because in cities, chargers, like if you put in a charge, you have to take away a spot. But there's only so many spots you get if you're Kroger. Luckily in Michigan, we like have the most parking spots. Like, I mean, the Meijer Kroger parking lots are just massive. But in other places like Pittsburgh, that doesn't have as much flat land for parking spots, or Cincinnati, that's a big deal. It's an issue. And there's no, I mean, we have a mayor, hello mayor, but there are just certain, the small things that would cause a Kroger to have 20 more charging stations that would make you want to shop at that Kroger if you had an electric vehicle, or make you want to, one of the small reasons you'd want to buy an electric vehicle is because like, oh, I can just charge it at my Kroger. Like that problem, that fundamental problem is not solved. It's just not. And then when you think about the workers, and you know, I think that for all the issues that we've seen in the past with industry and unions, from the Teamsters and UAW, this is an amazing opportunity. I mean, what better training platform than a union to like make the transition from ICE to EV, but also into like software engineering and AI. So I do think there's more that can be done besides sort of the educational component. You know, burying some of the hatchets that we've seen in the 20th century automotive industry to work together on some of these platforms. Because I agree, you know, you think about the Teamsters, like, and Waymo don't necessarily get along right now. But if we know this tidal wave is coming.
I'm making progress.
Yeah. If we know this tidal wave is coming, I fundamentally believe that Teamsters get in a room, say, okay, these jobs are going away. Tell me which jobs are staying and which jobs I now need to train my people for. But I don't think we're having that direct of a conversation right now. So, I mean, communications, besides education, besides bringing people together, communication is like the thing too that I think we need to work on.
Dawn, since Trevor just brought up education, what are the challenges?
Well, yeah, education, there's a lot of challenges. You know, at the University of Michigan, we talk about this a lot. And, you know, the technology is changing so fast. If we try to educate our students in the technology of today, it will be obsolete by the time they graduate. So we are not necessarily trying to ride that wave, because it's always going to be moving faster than we can. But we are training our students in the fundamentals. You know, they're going to need to know the fundamentals of electrical, mechanical engineering, computer science. Absolutely. And they're going to need to know how to communicate, like you mentioned. None of these problems are going to be solved by a single person or a single engineer sitting in their cubicle or at their computer. They're going to need to work in teams, multiple teams, and communicate across different disciplines with different people, with different stakeholders, to come together to really identify what is the critical need and what kind of solution can we develop. So they need to do teamwork, communication, and understand the entire system. You could make the single AV as safe as possible, but it has to interact with other cars and with streetlights and with roadways. How does that whole system come together to make the system safe? And I think trying to have that system perspective is something that we're absolutely training our students in at least in the College of Engineering at the University of Michigan, and I think every engineering school, and you know, many universities across the country. It's important, that teamwork, that communication, that system perspective, combined with the fundamentals of what the underlying technology is based on. You know, we can train them in 5G today, and 6G will come tomorrow, and then there'll be 7 and 8G, but they need to understand, you know, coding and multiplexing and those kinds of generic fundamentals so they can work in those new technologies. So absolutely, our students will be ready, because we'll teach them the fundamentals, the system thinking, and how to continue learning, and make them understand they're not going to know everything when they graduate. It's impossible, but they will be able to continue to learn.
That would seem to suggest that the roles of academic institutions may be even further than what they are now to continuing education.
Well, yes, there's continuing education from the university, but there's also on-the-job training, right? I mean, like I said, we're never going to be able to keep up with the latest and greatest technology because it's changing too fast. And not every student needs to know everything, but that on-the-job training, I think apprenticeships can be a really big, powerful thing. And, you know, micro-credentials and industry training. So I think that definitely there will be continued training, either on the job or in a university, short courses, and other opportunities.
So I've had classes in probabilities and statistics, but it doesn't prevent me from dreaming of one day hitting the lottery. It would help if I purchased tickets. But along those lines, you know, if you suddenly had $1 billion to spend in your respective areas, what one thing would you really want to invest in, Paul?
Our infrastructure issues more than $1 billion, but I'll give you a list of things that I think we probably, as a state, needs to start looking at addressing. First one is funding of our infrastructure. Right now, EVs are beginning to be, a lot of people are buying electric vehicles, which means the way we generate revenue for fixing our roads, it's cutting into that gas tax that people are paying. Quite frankly, we have not been calculating how much that cost is beginning to chip into regular tax revenue for fixing our roads. That's number one. Climate change is another one where, most of you aware we had a 100-year flood and a 500-year flood in Detroit last year within a 2-month period of each other. Freeways were flooded. We had to shut freeways down. A major artery like I-94 was shut down for a week because we had to do a lot of repair. So we have to change our design standards to meet the current condition. Our outlet pipes are like 4-inch outlet pipes, not big enough anymore. So we have to look at that. The next thing, resiliency. Resiliency is not cheap. Do you, as a state DOT, decide to spend $300 million to take care of the drainage issue on I-94, or you spend that $300 million fixing other roadways that are in critical needs, right? Because that $300 million to fix that drainage problem, it's underneath the freeway. People can't see. They can't see that, but you take care of a big problem. So that's a big challenge. The lack of resources to handle a lot of the issues that are confronting us is something we have to address moving forward. And I think the last one is talent pool. Everybody is pulling from the same talent, and you just see people moving from one company to the other because they are getting offered more money. You can only do that for so long, right? So how do we train the next generation, to be able to deal with all these new technology changes that are confronting us? So that's just a tip of the iceberg. So $1 billion is it's good, but it's not going to be enough to do what I have on my list of things.
It's a start.
Yes, exactly.
Congresswoman, you get to write $1 billion into a bill.
Hey, I've been doing that. And it's not enough. I guess so. I'm going to sort of build on what Paul and others are going to say. First of all, we got the infrastructure bill passed. It is, our roads and bridges in this country are equal to any underdeveloped world country, third world country. It is not something that we should be proud of. We have underinvested for 50 years. And now when we finally began, Governor Whitmer won on Fix the Damn Roads. I don't know how much you all have spent on flat tires or I've had like 5 flat tires and I'm looking, all of a sudden I saw Haley back there. She was with me one day anyway. So we finally passed it at a time that everything's twice as much as it costs to fix anything. So we need to begin to make this investment, but then and it's not going to cover what's got to be done, and we need to maintain. Once we get this done, we absolutely need to maintain our roads. But so that's the beginning. But the fact here is we got to bring our supply chain back to this country. is absolutely critical that we do that and we keep it here. I was there at General Motors when we thought just in time was just this wonderful thing and we were lowering costs. Well, not only have we not lowered costs now, it's an economic issue and a national security issue. And if all of a sudden, we're already behind because COVID has hit Taiwan and other countries and we're not getting them. But if China were to invade Taiwan, do we know what that would do, how that would just shut our economy down? It should send shivers down people's. We need to bring that chip supply down. Haley's more polite than I am. We should have passed a chips bill that just had the $2 billion legacy chips for the auto industry a year ago. I'm tired of politics that puts everything together and we don't get back. I know she agrees with me. I've had Nancy Pelosi's stiletto on my neck for a month. So, and I'm not kidding. So I'm trying to behave a little more. But we need to address these issues and we need to do it now. We can't keep putting off things that are important economically. So we need to bring that supply chain home and do that now. And then we need to talk about education, though. We're talking about training programs. Not everybody has to go to the university. We need I did robotics this week and I love STEM. We need to encourage young people to go into math and science, but not everybody was meant to be in the engineering school at the University of Michigan. There are a lot of young people that can make very good six-figure salaries and they need to learn electronics. They need to learn how to fix these electric vehicles. They need to learn how to build these roads. We need to learn how to maintain them. And we need to be investing in the technical skills that we are going to need for the future. And that is, I'll tell you something, in this country we I'll tell you one of my favorite jokes is a doctor who called a plumber in the middle of the night. And he fixed the toilet and gave him his bill. And he said, "Whoa, that's more than I make an hour." He said, "I know, I used to be one." There's a snobbery to, no offense, but could I live without a few, I won't name a profession, but can you imagine living without an electrician or a plumber or the skilled trades? They're critical to our life, and we need to respect them more and know that that is something that we need to be doing. The other thing that I sort of talked about, but I will also say we need to be doing is we need to be developing more independence on things like, so the next table I'm assembling is minerals. We need to build and refine those minerals for batteries here in the United States. And Joe Manchin, Haley's used to I call her at 11 o'clock at night and give her my latest, I call it my bitch session, but I'll behave. And Joe says to me, the environmentalists will never approve. They'll never give the permits. We have to get those permits. We have to get that independence. So the environmentalists and the unions are coming together to talk about how we can mine and develop those minerals, lithium for batteries. Those are all things we need to be doing. These guys are working on the roads and the bridges. Those are other things we need to be doing. Travis is doing more.
Trevor, you got $1 billion.
Oh, I have a whole plan. I'm glad I didn't go first. I got some time to think about it. All right. So, first $200 million would go towards fixing the workforce transition issue in a way that sets the standard for the world. So I'll give you an example. Center for Automotive Research did some work. Some of you have heard me use this stat before. There's about 300 Michigan companies that are at risk during the transition from internal combustion engine to battery electric. That's about 45,000 workers. 60% are likely to be impacted in a negative way. So I'd use the $200 million to fix that remaining 40%, fix that 60% that are going to be impacted in a negative way, and then use the remaining $200 million to attract people all over the world to be here. Okay, now I would use $400 million to apply universal basic mobility to Michigan cities. If you're going to be the global leader in mobility, you can't just lead the industry. You actually have to be one of the best places in the world to move around, whether you're a person or a good. And so I would focus on that, starting in our cities from Flint to Battle Creek to Detroit, create solid transit systems, or at least the base for solid transit systems. Then I would use the remaining, what would it be? Where am I at? I think I got 3 million. I got four. I got an extra 100 million. Okay. 400 million, I would invest in 20 hottest mobility companies in the world and turn that 400 million into a $4 billion return. And then we'd use that and cycle through some of those same ideas. That's my plan. What do you think?
If those companies come to Michigan.
They will.
Okay.
Why are you, don't doubt,
No,
man.
I'm not doubting. I'm just laying out the ground rules. All right. Dawn?
$1 billion, you know, it sounds like a lot, but it doesn't go very far once you start dividing it up. So, you know, given my university hat, I think we definitely need to invest more in research. And not just, you know, individual research projects, although those are important, but these big research projects that bring multiple people and teams together to solve the big challenges, like you're doing here in the CCAT. I think those types of research centers are really impactful. And I think training, as you mentioned, both all the way from the skilled trades, community colleges, up through university education and continuing education, right? It's not just one size fits all. Not everyone needs to go to the University of Michigan, get a 4-year degree. There are lots of other pathways to successful jobs contributing to the economy, and I think we need to invest the education across. And I'll also, you know, put in a plug for K through 12 and investing more in teachers and training for teachers and pay for teachers, because I think they really set the groundwork for the students who come out of that to be successful in the post-secondary education. If you're not doing well in K through 12, it's really hard to be successful at the post-secondary. So I'll say, you know, research and education.
I like that answer. Any closing thoughts? Anything you didn't get to say you wanted to say?
Look, I want to keep Michigan. We put the world on wheels. I want to keep Michigan at the forefront of mobility for the world, which means, I mean, I'm really proud. I don't get to work with you as much, but I can be a real pain in the rear of both of these guys. But we really do work together. We talk regularly. I do talk to the University of Michigan. We need to stay at the forefront of this. It's an exciting world. And we want to be at the forefront of innovation and technology. We want to create the jobs, and we want to redefine what mobility is of the future. All of you wouldn't be here if you didn't care. I think it's an exciting time to be in this field, and I know that Michigan is going to stay globally at the forefront of all of this.
All right. Well, thank
So
you. And
if
I'm
I may,
sorry. Go ahead.
I think we need to be mindful about equity and inclusion as we move along in this journey, because what you don't want to do is leave a major segment of the society behind in this new frontier. And the way we do that is to make sure that a lot of the trade schools, as the Congresswoman said, have been included in how we train people, right? And getting in the communities, getting them involved in some of the aspect of this technology is going to be important, because you don't want to get to level 4, level 5, or even EVs, as we're making a big push now that some still don't buy into that, right? Then you have the haves and the have-nots, winners and losers, and that to me should be part of what we do moving forward.
We got to take more risks. Public sector, private sector, we have to take more. If you want to be a leader, you got to lead. And leading means taking risks across the board, across modes of transportation.
And I think we have the pieces here to work together and to start with these small-scale pilots that are risks, learn from them, and then build up the things. And I think to test these new mobility solutions, you know, we have 4 seasons here, which makes us more, you know, representative of the rest of the world. We can test these things in the snow, in the rain, in the heat, and in the fog. And I think having that capability, and the MCity and the ACM and the universities and the auto companies, the public-private partnerships, we have big cities, we have small towns, we have rural areas. I think we have all the pieces. We just need to work together, and then we can make Michigan successful and the leader in this area, as we have been for 100 years and more.
Well, thank you, and please join me in thanking our panelists.